when you do have more significant errors, how you follow up with them, how you own them, and how you can justify and learn from them. Those are the moments that you're going to be showing actual leadership, ownership going forward, because that's when you're going to learn and actually grow.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Orange Pill Club podcast. Today we have an extraordinary guest here who's made significant contributions to the field of healthcare. Meet clinical pharmacist Dr. Adam Olivetti. Adam has successfully led an antimicrobial stewardship program, which has reduced hospitalization costs. Additionally, he's worked in various specialty fields, providing telepharmacy. Adam envisions a future where blockchain technology and genomics testing is integrated into the field of healthcare. Currently, Adam provides clinical pharmacy services for hospice patients, and in his spare time, Adam also runs an engaging podcast. He often shares his insights on investments in stocks and digital assets. The podcast is called All In Investing. Adam, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. It's really great to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. So, can you start by telling us a little bit about, what you do right now? How'd you get to sort of your position, becoming a clinical pharmacist?
For sure, for sure. So went to pharmacy school back in Wilkes University up in Scranton area, northeastern Pennsylvania. Graduated in 2013, and I worked for the Red Company for a while, CVS. That was with them, and I always knew that clinical pharmacy was the draw. But as we're going to be talking about a little bit more about Bitcoin in a bit. Unfortunately, I was not one who was of privilege, so I did have to pay student loans, where I learned a lot about finances and the cost of actual education and things like that. So I did work for CVS for a while, and the money was great. It was afforded me the ability to pay off my loans. But eventually, I started to get more and more curious about money, which led me to have a little podcast, which we haven't really posted in quite a bit. But we would like to get back into that options trading, stocks, and it eventually led us to Bitcoin, which is pretty much my primary focus right now. I'm definitely not Bitcoin maxi. I do have some other cryptocurrencies I'm invested in and interested in, but I would say Bitcoin mostly is for sure my main stance on that. And what led me to clinical pharmacy for sure was I wanted to get away from the retail side of things. It was becoming a little bit of a drain, and I always knew that I wanted to get into using my degree at the highest level that I could, something that I could see and envision being useful for a longer part uh, of my career, because physically I don't think I could do 13-hour days on my feet anymore. And I see the field of pharmacy um, moving a little bit more away from the manual labor side of things, which is the physical dispensing of medications, which will always be there and a necessary task. But I do see that kind of almost basically maxed and capped out with a lot of the Pharmageddon things that have been going on. And I think that the final shift, especially since COVID, has begun, where pharmacists and knowledge based and consulting in general is going to be the path forward to the most use of your degree in a successful manner and have a little bit better work life balance and enjoy life going forward.
Yeah, you've definitely mentioned Pharmageddon, working on your feet for, what seems to be like 13-hour shifts. There's definitely some, I would say a lot of people who practice in the community setting of pharmacy, they're definitely upset with the way things are right now. But it's really good that you've sort of positioned yourself to become, a clinical pharmacist, and you're using your degree to, pretty much the maximum use possible. As you've sort of practiced, in the field of pharmacy, what's probably the most important lesson you've learned throughout your career?
I'd have to say the one thing that I took from some of my preceptors in college was uh, one, to rely on the team around you, and two, you're going to make mistakes. That's probably the hardest thing to come to grips with, especially as a newer pharmacist coming out of college. This would probably be what I would speak to mostly, would be younger pharmacists or starting off in the field. I think that you will make mistakes, and how you learn from them, how you report on them, and just being honest. And as long as you were justifying whatever exactly had happened with a medication error, because we're infallible. We're humans. You're going to be making. I mean, I've been practicing now pretty much exactly 10 years. I'm out of school, so you'll be making millions of decisions one by one. You cannot be right all of the time. Many of the errors that you make, they will ultimately end up being relatively clinically insignificant. But when you do have more clinically significant errors, and not that they all shouldn't be reported, they all will be, but how you follow up with them, how you own them, and how you can justify and learn from them. Those are the moments that you're going to be showing actual leadership, ownership going forward, because some people won't show the same integrity as others, or might try to point fingers. Uh, Really trying to actually just internalize that and coming forward with whatever might have gone wrong. That's when you're going to learn and actually grow as a practitioner in general.
That's really great advice. What do you think is the biggest challenge you're facing currently in your role as a clinical pharmacist or some sort of project you're working on? And how are you tackling it right now?
Um, Currently, I mean, I'm a remote clinical pharmacist, geriatric specifically. Two things at the moment. I mean, there are people in our company that are obviously higher than me, and again, a lot of things that I'm going to be expressing, I am an employee, so these are my opinions and my opinions alone. They don't reflect anything upon my company. I have to say that, but a lot of things right now, and this was actually one of the questions I had seen that you had written with regard to blockchain again, and I don't want to constantly go back to that, but currently, at least as far as geriatric pharmacy goes, and hospice and pain and palliative care, the logistics solutions and supply chains. It's becoming an absolute nightmare. Whether it is nebulizer treatment, the ones that come to mind currently, or at least most recently, nebulizer treatments, something as simple as Duaneb, the ipratropium albuterol, or um, injectable lorazepam, various strengths of lorazepam, all shortages, and they're constantly varying throughout the country in different places. What is and isn't available, so it's becoming very difficult to have. And I think hydromorphone was another one. Dilaudid was another one that was we were having a little bit of difficulty procuring solutions for at the moment. So
Wow.
those things, which I do think blockchain can really help. That's probably one of the two biggest opportunities I would see in the healthcare industry, at least with regard to pharmacy, is supply chain from manufacturer down, making sure that medications that are needed, not just for the niche of hospice, pain, and palliative, but everything throughout the supply chain, making sure that we can validate legitimate sourcing, making sure that they're not coming from illegitimate manufacturers, or and just making sure that they're actually available. Because one thing providers don't tend to um, appreciate as much, the practitioners, sometimes they realize if they order a medication, they just assume it's available, and it's, well, just like gold, there is a finite amount of any of any material out there, so things can run out, and they do. And that's probably the biggest logistic solution right now that's most difficult at the moment, is making sure people are comfortable, and they have to have the medication in order to be comfortable. So
That's pretty interesting. You mentioned drug shortages. I used to actually own my own pharmacy, and we serviced about 200 to 300 hospice clients here in the Bay Area. But when you started mentioning, there's
oh
actually drug shortages of lorazepam, Duaneb. Like I used to have a ton of this on my shelf all the time. So it's hard
yeah,
for me to imagine, not having that, for hospice patients because that's a huge need, especially at end of life. Difficulty breathing. A lot of people
yeah,
definitely have anxiety going through that motion. So That's very difficult to sort of imagine. But we didn't really use lorazepam injection too much. A lot of the providers actually in our area used the tablets as a sublingual way of dissolving it. So it's kind of interesting how to see how I guess hospice is practiced in different areas. So you mentioned
Right. It
blockchain.
definitely varies cross country.
Oh yeah, you mentioned blockchain technology and its application in supply chain. Do you see this as something the industry would adopt in the next 5 years or 10 years, or do you feel like we're still quite a far while away?
I mean, I would just I would be postulating at best on the topic, but there are so many levers that need to get pulled, and especially companies lobbying against to stop any sort of innovation or mass change like this, and mostly because that would require them to have mass change throughout their company, throughout all of their computer systems. That costs them a lot of money. The best analogy I could make is in I think it was in like the 1940s through the early 70s when the seatbelt of the car was eventually made mandatory that all cars had to have a seatbelt. Car manufacturers, Ford, etc., they all lobbied against seatbelts despite massive data that they clearly were helping save lives. They lobbied against them because they didn't want to incur the manufacturing cost of installing them in all of their vehicles. Eventually, that did win out, but this was decades of delaying. And currently, I could see companies like basically the two, and like I had alluded to, the other large, I think, spot that blockchain technology could be worked in would be EMR and possibly genomics. Those are the big three, at least, applications for blockchain. And yeah, I think to answer the question a little bit more shortly, 5 years would be a stretch, just because I think they're going to delay. Um, Ideally, a point of service where a pharmacist can validate the product's original source and current like supply lines. I would love to say that in an ideal world it seems very simple, but unfortunately, I know the way that large pharmacy companies, whether it be uh, the local retail pharmacies, CVS, Walgreens, etc., or um, smaller chains or any other sourcing place, they're going to delay that upfront cost of updating, which is very sad because it shouldn't be that large of a barrier to update software. But so that's the only true barrier that I see to that. Do I think that it should happen? Absolutely. I would hope 5 to 7 years. Yeah, I think it could be realistic. I doubt before 5 years.
That's great insight that you've shared on, the seatbelts. I mean, it does seem to me that anytime there's technological, advancements or, suggestions, startups that come into the healthcare sector, it's incredibly slow to see any traction or any sort of movement. You mentioned, the application of blockchain technology and genomics and also EMRs. I just kind of wanted to pick your brain a little bit more and if you can sort of elaborate on those topics.
So, essentially, they kind of would go hand in hand. Again, the largest one that, at least in one of my previous jobs that I'd worked for, I had used Epic. I was very familiar with that EMR system, and I thought that it was fantastic. I know the other large one is, I believe, Cerner. I had never really used it, but essentially, integrating blockchain technology, and I do think this is one of the largest barriers. It would be you would have to create a situation in which all of a patient's medical data, whether it be from birth or ongoing from whatever part they're going to be followed up at, whenever it starts up, they would integrate the patient's all of their medical information into a blockchain node, and that person would take ownership and sovereignty of their own medical information. The providers would also have access to the blockchain, and they can verify on end to end whether or not this is new valid information, and all the other blocks in the chain. Essentially, the concept would be that they can validate whether or not this is actually their current data. Unfortunately, I don't know how many people would be wanting to take ownership of their own medical data all the time, because many currently can't. Like, I couldn't tell you, aside from a flu shot every now and then that I get, every year I get that. I can't tell you all of my vaccine information. Ideally, a patient would have their own ownership of that on their own EMR record that they own, and then they can compare and contrast with the provider that they see, and they would also have access. And ideally, that would protect from any sort of theft of medical information. Depending on what blockchain would be used, I'm not sure, um, because Bitcoin would be a little bit slow to integrate with that. That would be quite a ways away. Maybe they would want it faster. There may be some other candidates for that, but then as they get faster or less decentralized, then um, if they have a dev team, then you would basically be saying that one centralized development team might have access to a patient's information, and that essentially wouldn't work with HIPAA. So there'd be a large barriers with that, but I do think that that would be the ideal scenario with regard to integrating blockchains into EMR records, keeping that so that they can access their medical data at all times. And with regard to genomics, I'm not sure if are you regarding like pharmacogenomic testing, or like with
Yeah.
regard to uh, embryo.
More of pharmacogenomics, I guess. That's kind of the next topic I want to
Okay.
talk about.
Okay. So
Yeah.
I mean, at least with regard to what I would see is so let's say a patient's genetic code was mapped, and they're seen to be hypermetabolizer or of maybe CYP2D, CYP2D6. Then you would know uh, they would be metabolizing a codeine metabolite much quicker than some others, and they could possibly either get less effect. They would be getting, I believe, less effect of codeine when it's converted over to morphine in the body, and that would apply to various other drugs. I'm just giving that up an example because that's kind of more in my wheelhouse, but at the moment. But yeah, I think that genomic testing and understanding what medications would essentially, with regard to metabolism and how they're going to be working and being most effective for patients, because it would reduce the amount of trial and error. For many practitioners, they generally tend to fall in love with one medication per class, because it's not that it's not their responsibility to know every medication, but that's more the onus of the pharmacist to be the specialist to know all of the ACE inhibitors, all of the ARBs, etc., every kind of option within the class. Many providers tend to fall in love with like one or two because they have many other things forming the plan of care. And then they can switch out from there if they are unsuccessful with a medication, maybe that they generally tend to start with because they've had good luck with in other patients. Um, that said, say we know that certain medication might be more effective in this patient because we have that genetic information already on file, ideally in a blockchain, which they can already have presented. The provider can access it. The pharmacist would be able to access it at all kind of multiple checkpoints throughout the dispensing chain. I think that that would be an amazing, ideal scenario. How long these things take to come to fruition, it's definitely going to take a lot of time and investment. And those are the things that are usually, like I said before, the biggest hurdles to it all. But yeah.
Sure. When I was a pharmacy student, actually, was working in this is Ventura County for the psych department. They actually did a pharmacogenomics testing study. I think we took about 400, 500 patients, and we determined to see it was a hypermetabolizer, or I forgot all the terms. There's normal, hyper, and
Yeah.
I can't remember the other ones, but
I definitely.
yeah, the question really was from my preceptor was like, all right, well, is this going to make an impact on the patients? And I think like there was only like one or two people out of the 400 or 500 patients that we looked at that had some sort of intervention that we can make, but it wasn't really a meaningful intervention. It didn't really drive a change in
Mm,
the therapeutics for that patient. So I sort of that that's a very limited experience, I think, but it's definitely interesting to see what pharmacogenomics can really sort of present in the future. I think there definitely needs to be more data to sort of help determine will this change the therapeutics of certain drugs that are being classified. But to your credit, you said like a lot of doctors only use one medication and one drug class because that's all they really know and that's what they're really familiar with. And that's actually very true. I mean, I've seen that through experience as well. So, um,
Yeah, and like I said, hopefully taking less trial and error out of it all, maybe making things a little bit more streamlined so that they don't have to go through multiple SSRIs or different things. I'm just kind of uh, postulating things out there, putting things out there. But yeah, hopefully that could maybe make a meaningful impact there. But again, that'll all take time. Like you said, a lot more data needed.
so sort of a fun topic. I know we were talking about hospice, and I wanted to gather your thoughts on, I guess, ketamine usage and end of life care.
Um, so I do see it used. I not too often, but it's generally used for patients that are at a pain score of generally 7 or above, consistent, and they can either no longer tolerate opioids once you're getting into very, very large doses. I mean, you're talking things that it would any opioid naive patient that would be at these levels, that would be completely you'd be unresponsive if you took these. But it would be usually like 300 milligrams of morphine or more. And I mean, some patients can be 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, like very, very large doses of opioids when they can be considered for it. Generally, I do see it more in hospices that are on the West Coast, usually California, Oregon, Washington, places like that. They tend to utilize this therapy a lot more often. There has been very good studies, and I actually looked up two of them. I think it was the name Mercandante in 2018 and Chung et al. In 2020. And relatively small numbers. It looks like one was 44 patients and the other was 70. But generally, I mean, you're talking about patients who are 7 out of 10 on the pain scale, which again is subjective. Take that for what it is. But 7 to 8, and they're getting all the way down to 3 or 2.8, 3.5 on the pain scale, which generally, if you're talking like most relative terms, a 3 might be you have a very bad headache, or maybe you like sprained your ankle or something like that. And then 7, 8, 9, you're talking that's you're borderline completely unable to do anything else, or like that's like every single thing on you would hurt once you're up at that. That's like unimaginable pain that I've actually probably never experienced at that level in my life. But to get all the way down from that end all the way down to the other is pretty impressive. And with regard to dosing of it, generally you see it IV infusion, which is why it's not too commonly used, because it's generally last line therapy. Usually you'll see it something to the rate of like I think is usually like 5 to 15 milligrams an hour for most patients, would be for pain and palliative care. Usually 1 mg per kg per hour would be general anesthesia, and that would be a much higher dosing, which was what it is usually used for. There's also, I've seen some studies, I believe, and this wouldn't relate to hospice care, but I think they're using it in some studies for like depression studies and things like that. So a lot of interesting uses coming out with that. But yeah, cautions with cardiac and psychosis patients would be one of the big things. But it does have really great results in refractory pain cases at very high levels, many cancers and such.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A lot of newer providers that I talk to, they're very receptive to the use of ketamine, but it's always when I talk to the older doctors, there's like, no ketamine, we're not touching that at all. So that's pretty interesting. Just kind of the shift in sort of like the
And there is the,
dynamics.
yeah, there is definitely a lot of newer school thought versus old school thought. Even going back to some providers get stuck in certain ways over 40, 50 years of practice. But yeah, it's definitely got a lot of promise in those refractory cases. And as far as I'm concerned, I like the fact that we're starting to find, while maybe when a lot of these substances came out, I believe it came out in like the 60s or 70s, but while they may be used for one thing, we're trying to find alternative uses for them, even though they may have a bad reputation. Like in particular in hospice, one of my favorite drugs would be methadone. Methadone is a great drug for pain and palliative care. Many people hear that word and they tense up. They don't like that word. It's not, and it's like, no, it's a fantastic drug. It really does work well. It requires specialized monitoring. Many providers don't want to do, but that's where I come in. So that is
Yeah,
another one. But yeah,
that's pretty interesting. Yeah, I mean, in the field of, I guess, mental health, they do have a different specialized isomer of ketamine. It's called Spravato. It's like a nasal spray, but I've seen that used to treat like PTSD. So, I mean, the application of the ketamine, it's definitely there. So it's pretty, it'd be really cool to see the next 5, 10 years how ketamine's used for different applications. But, slowly,
yeah, I
I
definitely think
guess,
there's promise.
yeah. Changing gears here, I mean, I rarely get to talk to other healthcare providers that are also Bitcoiners. And when we started connected on LinkedIn, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I spend a lot of my time educating
Yeah.
doctors, pharmacists about Bitcoin. And it's like most of the time they just don't want to hear about it. But, I got to ask you, what sparked your interest in the world of Bitcoin? Like, how did you hear about this?
Oh, and see, this is where we can relax a little bit and talk good shop. So yeah, yeah, exactly. So and it's actually funny. I have a good friend of mine, also a pharmacist, and he said, "Wait, there's another podcast who's a pharmacist out there, and he talks about Bitcoin." He's like, "You got to be kidding me!" And I was like, "No, no." But anyway, so this goes way back, and I'm not sure exactly when you graduated school, but so like I said, graduated in 2013, and I had originally, I can remember conversations on our big couch amongst many beverages and such that you'd be having as a 21, 22-year-old college kid, and I remember specifically multiple times the thing that always kept leading to it was actually online poker, back when you could play online poker, Poker Stars, and those kind of things. And I remember my friend telling me, he's like, "Hey, there's this Bitcoin thing, and there's Bitcoin Faucet, and you can get free Bitcoin." And I was like, "I don't know what this is. It's just like, I was like, oh, it's $1, it's 50 cents, and then it was $12, and then it was $1." And it would be like every year we kind of it kept coming back. And I remember he showed me an online table of people playing with Bitcoin. And I keep thinking back to it that you had 9 people at a table, and the stack sizes of each player were anywhere between like 30 and 50 Bitcoin. At the time, worth, I think it was maybe $40 to $60 a player or something to that effect. And I'm thinking now, I'm like, man, these people were playing with like houses, like in today's terms. So I thought that that was kind of funny. But essentially, you would see the different cycles go. It went up, it went down. 2017 obviously caught everyone's interest right around this time at Thanksgiving. Everyone was talking about it in 2017 when it went from about 2,300 in June all the way up to 17,000. And it had caught my interest there. I couldn't quite get my head around it at the time, and I was still trying to pay off all of my loans, so I took care of that. But eventually, once my loans were paid off and I could start focusing a little bit more on investing, something I was interested in, I found my way into stocks, Facebook, this, that. And eventually 2020 happened, which was the real catalyst that sent me there. Um, and I wish I had come to the conclusion about a month earlier, because I remember it was about October of 2020 when I had realized that all of the money printing was going to have a serious consequence. Um, because at the time, being a single male, making over a certain threshold that they deemed to be too much to get any stimulus check. And I had many friends around me saying, "Oh, well, I'm going to go redo my bathroom. I'm going to go buy myself whatever it was. One of my friends put big tires on his car, do all these little things." And I'm just like, why do you, for no reason, get to do these things? It was like $2,500 tires on a truck, and I was like, why do you get to do these things and I don't? The government just decided to say, no, you don't. And I was like, of no fault of my own. So I felt almost cheated in a sense that everyone had gotten incrementally, not to say closer or anything, that sounds wrong, but for no reason. Like everyone else got $200 for pass and go, and I didn't. And it made me start thinking about inflation or the consequences. So it's October of 2020, and I'm thinking, and eventually I stumbled upon Raoul Paul and Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy talking, at least on their first podcast that they had done back then. And it got me thinking more and more. I was like, gold, maybe tips could be an option for an inflation hedge. And again, I wasn't investing in Facebook and some other companies, starting to dabble with options. But I was like, okay, what is happening here? I could see this curve happening just like it did 3, 4 years prior with the 2017 run up. And it crossed that 17,000 mark. And that was when I said, I was like, okay, this is where this is all going once I truly dove in and understand that it no one owns it. It's completely decentralized and it only has one purpose. It produces blocks every 10 minutes, give or take. And you can't stop it at this point. It's gotten too big. It's spread across too many countries, too many nodes, too many miners, and at this point, it would be not cost effective. There's no country, no person that would have enough money or resources to even fork it if they tried. Even Elon Musk or the entire United States, it would take 3 or 4 years to build yourself enough miners, enough nodes to actually overtake the chain and rewrite the code and fork it completely. It would take too long to even build the miners. You can't do it. So it's proved all of those battle tests, and this is basically it's what the world has needed ever since Nixon had taken us off the gold standard. And yeah, that's kind of how I stumbled upon it, and I do think it is going to completely change the world as long as you have a long time preference. That's the biggest key I would tell people.
I love it. I absolutely love it. You have so much energy about this topic, and I have to say,
Yeah,
poker is probably the first time I've heard of someone getting into Bitcoin. Usually, I think from a lot of people in that 2010 to 13 era, most people heard about Bitcoin through the Silk Road. That's certainly how I heard about it when I was in college. My roommate would be purchasing weed because that was the only way to get weed back in college. And he showed me what the Silk Road was. I was like, oh, okay, this is pretty interesting. But I didn't really pay too much attention to it. I thought it was just like a virtual gift card. And I really didn't pay any more attention until I want to say I was in graduate school for pharmacy. This would have been 14 or 15. And I sort of revisited this topic again. I was like, oh, okay, Bitcoin, that's pretty interesting. But it wasn't until like 2017, 18 where I actually sat down, read Satoshi's white paper, and I started realizing like this is like really crazy what has been created here. You're right. It can't be taken away. It's impossible. It's way too big to do anything at this point. You'd have to physically shut off the internet, which good luck, by the way. You're not going to be able to do that. But the sort of the feeling I got was when I first found out about the internet at my aunt's house when I was like maybe 7 or 8 years old. I was like, this is the new TCP IP, but for financial transactions. So that's really cool. At least you know how you discovered Bitcoin and sort of you shared your thoughts on it. What do you feel like are some common misconceptions or myths about Bitcoin that you frequently encounter when you talk to people about it?
it's backed by nothing. The government's going to shut it down. They're going to copy it. Many people don't want to take their own responsibility. Those are kind of the big four that I would see from most people. They think that it doesn't really make sense to them how you can make something out of nothing. Um, and it is just a massive education curve. And a lot of people, like the moniker always goes, you get Bitcoin at the price that you deserve it. And that really is true, just in the sense that it's going to take something repeatedly to spark enough interest to get people to shift, to get people to actually look and realize. And most people, they're maybe not in the same position that you or I are in where we can think about these things. Many people are just trying to get by, and they don't have they see it as it's too much money just to put in an investment. It's $35,000. I don't have that laying around. Not many people do. So they see it that way. They don't kind of look at it as which I wish they would, uh, like their 401k. If everyone could just say, oh, this is just the new thing, and just like your 401k where you get your match or what most people do with your company, you just give a small little allocation, you set it up with whatever exchange, it buys it, And then, every so often you should, take custody and into cold storage or multi-sig, however you set that up. You should do that as well. But not many people might not want to do that as well. But I think that that's kind of the biggest education gap, is that most people, they either can't take the volatility or they just don't have the time to do it. It's not integrated into their paycheck. It's not automated.
Yeah. I sort of mentioned I spend a lot of my time educating healthcare providers, but it seems to me that a lot of healthcare providers, they just simply don't want to invest their money into it. Sort of the way they look at it is like, I already make so much. I just need to work a couple more hours and I'll be fine. They don't have a retirement account. I don't have equities or even real estate. So I think getting that hurdle of having to talk to someone about personal finance is like the most important thing. And that's sort of what I struggle with when I talk to a lot of people, explaining that. So here's kind of a
It
fun
is
question.
it is
Oh.
definitely. Oh, sorry. I would just say, just to piggyback off that, it is definitely still seen as taboo to talk about money, um, and that's tough. Most people, they don't want to say. You don't have to say how much anybody has or anything, but it's just being open, like me and you right now, speaking, talking, just sharing ideas. That concept is going to be much different in Gen Z, the generation below us. I think that's going to be a much more common thing where they're okay sharing ideas and how to get forward. Whereas people, millennials, and all the generations above, X boomers, etc., it's it's not as kosher to share ideas on what you're doing and how to get forward and how to get to whatever that next level is for that person.
I'm going to share with you actually a funny story. When I was actually founding Knee Howdy, and I was trying to explain to some of these pharmacies, like, yeah, we will provide, drug rebates in Bitcoin. There's probably one place you've shopped at. They're a pretty large publicly traded company. I was able to get a meeting with their C-suite. They threw me out in the first 10 minutes. They were like, I don't want to hear about Bitcoin. They contacted me actually a month later. It was like, hey, my son keeps talking about Bitcoin. I don't know much about it, but can you come back and just educate us? But that sort of dialogue is like, that's happened at, 6 or 7 times where, I have to go back and talk to people about the merits of Bitcoin. And yeah, we spent almost about 6 to 7 months negotiating with these series of pharmacies. And at the last minute, the C-suite came out and said, look, if we sort of like do a partnership or adopt this idea of giving Bitcoin to people, the problem is if Bitcoin goes to zero, I'm going to get fired from my job. There's just way too much risk here. But that was kind of like, the insight I sort of gained. A lot of publicly traded companies, they see some sort of potential here with Bitcoin or blockchain, but they don't want to be the first ones to be in it. And they still feel like it's way too volatile and it could affect, their stock price and ultimately get them fired, from the board of directors or from their C-suite position.
That would definitely make sense in those positions, and that's probably why a lot of the crypto channels and things that you can see on YouTube, whatnot, they always go, "Oh, why doesn't everybody just move all in?" And it's like, no, that is kind of ridiculous to say for most people. Like you said, if they do that, well, they have to weigh out the consequences of if they are wrong. And so what I would say to any person, again, not financial advice, but in my own opinion, I would think any company, you could legitimately argue that bare minimum, it could be a 1 to 2% hedge just as a small investment. I don't really think it's necessary for most companies, at least, unless you're directly crypto involved, to go beyond 5 like even 5% of your assets as an investment, just to keep your company diversified. Now, there are going to be some crazy, a little bit more aggressive ones, MicroStrategy's like over 150% allocated or something like that. But some also say that the Bitcoin or the crypto sector could be the 12th sector of the S&P. So in that case, I mean, you'd be looking at maybe upwards 10 to 15% of an allocation. Now, as a personal investment, I might be more aggressive. Maybe you are. That's fine as a personal investment, but that's just maybe our position as a person. But like you said, when you're speaking from your career for an entire company, generally it is too much risk, and I understand that. So I'm just trying to be realistic with what a C-suite exec could at least expect to do, and try to convince somebody to go for. So like you would say. If it was a small portion of a rewards program like you guys had set up, which I think is an amazing idea, by the way, um,
Thanks.
then yeah, I think that that could be a very viable business. How much they're going to be willing to be going all in, I think it has to be a small allocation depending on how much they can stomach that volatility, which not many people can. Um, but it will eventually come down and it will look like nothing. There's going to be a time well within our lifetime where a $10,000 swing in the price in one day will feel like nothing, because when the price is, north of 500K, $10,000 won't really look all that significant. But
You make a very good point there. So, this is a fun question here, but, the ETF for Bitcoin through like BlackRock and, a few other companies, it's been delayed and they're talking about it's going to get approved. Do you feel like this will be a huge liquidity increase for Bitcoin? Do you think it'll have a pretty material impact on, Bitcoin's price? I guess I wanted to just sort of gather your thoughts here.
there is definitely going to be a frenzy. I do think no matter what I had said originally when all this had started was back, I think it was like around 21 or 22K back in May. Then the rumors came, it shot up to about 33 or so in June-ish, I believe. And that's when all the rumors had come out, oh, they're going to approve the ETF. And if you looked a little bit closer on all of the deadlines and what the SEC is allowed to do, they said they had a July deadline, an August deadline, and there was one in October. And the final deadline for pretty much everything is going to be January 13th. And that's when we're going to find out whether it's January 13th to the day. I don't know if that, I don't even know what day that is on the calendar, but it might be the week before, which do I think that'll coincide with a new tax year for companies? I think maybe that'll make sense. We're just going to start it at the beginning of January. We're going to start fresh. We're going to approve all of them at the same time so that we can't give one company an advantage. Many people think that they want to give BlackRock an advantage, which, conspiracy theorists and stuff, I wouldn't totally disagree, but I think that would put Gensler under way too much fire, or other people. That would look a little bit too suspicious if they did give them even 2 trading days of an advantage. It would essentially end the race. So I think they do need to green light all of them at the same time, and then, like you said, hopefully uh, the general population can just click a button on their 401k allocations, etc. They can put it in their whatever one it is, whether it's Fidelity or Vanguard or BlackRock, whatever iShares can be through, and it just comes out of their paycheck, because it is too hard. The barriers right now to do things that are very interesting to me or you, it's just not something that the general population is going to do, because even using hardware wallets is, I found it fascinating. And when I told my friends about it, they were like, what do you care? And I was like, I took this thing that's completely off the internet. There's no code. It's not even plugged into anything. I sent it from one wallet to the other, and then it amazed me that, like, how efficient it actually worked. That like, thinking about that I could send you your, 2,000 miles away from me right now, and I could send you a small amount of Bitcoin. And within 15 minutes, I can go on a block explorer. I could see an address. I could see what amount was sent, when it was sent, verified, not don't trust, and it'll be there. And then once it's there, it's not reversible, and it's never coming back. And when I saw that, I was like, this is that was when everything truly fully solidified. Even though I had the theory all in my head, when you actually make a layer one chain transaction for the first time, it's mind blowing. That I thought was that was, I was like, wow, this is absolutely crazy, and no one cares about this at all. This is what Woz and Steve Jobs thought in whatever 1985 or something like that, when they emailed each other hi or whatever they said. So
That's a good one. So I gotta ask. I mean, you seems like you talk to your friends about Bitcoin a lot. Have you successfully orange
mhm.
pilled them? Have you talked to other?
A
Yeah.
few of us that are, yeah, it. I would say people who are open to it, they like the ups, and I always tell them, I was like, you're not like. I definitely took quite the pounding in 2022, just like everyone else did, and I just want to tell them, I'm like, you're gonna ask me about this in 2020, like late 23, maybe 24, and then I was like, trust me, it's gonna get weird come election season 2024. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, that's when it's all gonna get crazy again. Now the ETF kind of threw a massive wrench into things, like I didn't know that, so that's moving up some timelines. But yeah, late 2024 and pretty much all of 2025 are gonna be a wild ride, and I'm like, I've learned and I understand my lessons. I'm not going to try to super trade it, but I'm going to have a little bit that I'll try to at least draw from this time and learn from mistakes. But I definitely think if you wanted the easiest thing that I could tell anybody, I'd be like, probably whatever you want for the long haul, just keep in a vault and don't touch. But 2026 will probably hurt, and the hurt is going to hurt so much more than the good times. You're going to think it's never going to end, and you will fall into the trap. They'll say things like super cycle, mega cycle, ultimate cycle, and it's not going to happen. It's going to depress a little bit. It's probably not going to draw down 60, 70%. Maybe it'll be 50%, 55, but it hurts. I will tell people that the hurt is not, well, it will hurt 4, 5, 6 times more than it will feel good when it's going up, because you will lose yourself in it. And that is something that I always precaution people with, is that you need to truly understand what volatility is. And that's why, while playing poker and things like that, people think like, oh, degen, whatever. And I'm like, no, that gave me a basis to understand volatility and understand and being able to relate to what the pain is. Because you remember the hands you lose, you don't remember the hands you win. So I will always caution anyone with that tale to buckle up and think long term. And if I was to set a realistic goal for any American or any person across the world, my current working theory would be to completely break, or at least be financially free, where you maybe don't have to work or you choose to work wherever you do. My current working theory would be to own the Bitcoin halving reward, whatever that is, in whatever year, whether it was 50, 25, 2015, 6.25, 3.125, etc., etc. Own that halving reward, never touch it, and wait 3 cycles. That is extremely conservative. Most people would say that is extremely conservative, but I would think if you were to own the halving reward in Bitcoin, whatever at whatever time, wait 3 cycles from then. In my opinion, I think you will be able to choose what you do with your life, unless you decide to live extremely extravagantly and want to drive a Bugatti. But no, I do think that would be my current working thesis. Own the halving reward. Don't think one Bitcoin or whatever, whether it's 2 or 3 halvings from now. You say, hey, this is what I want, and I'm just going to hold this and think long term, think anti fragile, and yeah, you'll be much better off living a frugal lifestyle and just living reasonably, and just wait.
A good one. I think with any emerging technology that's out there, you're going to see this volatility. I mean, when Amazon first came out, I mean, they crashed like 90%, like 4 or 5 times. But, I think any great sort of technological advancement is going to have this sort of expected journey. So, gosh, that's a lot that we talked about Bitcoin. Um, Bitcoin's halving is going to be coming up next year. I think it's going to be on 420 of next year. At least that's what the miners are trying to get it on that
Roughly,
date.
yeah,
Yeah.
give or take.
Do you have any? I mean, this is a fun question here, but do you have any price predictions of what Bitcoin could possibly hit this next cycle? Doesn't have to be at the end of next year, but it could be the next 4 years.
Um, I would say 2024, it's very reasonable now. I would think my original thesis was looking right into the election, which I don't really want to talk politics. I don't
Sure.
get too involved there. But that was when I thought the actual bull run would start taking off again, and I think we could easily cross 69,000 in that frame, and that's what would lead into 2025. The ETF kind of skewed timeframes. So I do think that maybe that can move it up to summer, where we at least cross break the 70,000 barrier, which that's where we haven't gone, and then we go into price discovery. I think it's very reasonable for us to 3x the previous peak, which could be, you'd be roughly at about just over 200,000. I think if you were to put me at a very low end range, I would say 120K to 300. And if I was to actually put like a specific number on it, I'm trying to be more conservative and realistic. I could see about a 145 to 155K Bitcoin, probably sometime in mid 2025. That's where I would put it at. Um, there are a lot of different scenarios which could also affect things. How out of hand these ETFs get, I've seen reasonable arguments for a 730K Bitcoin by July 2025, which I would very much enjoy. That would be very nice. That would far accelerate that timeline I had given of owning the halving reward and waiting 3 full cycles or 12 years. That would very much accelerate that timeline, but I don't see that. It doesn't seem realistic. There would be too many things that would all have to go right. Um, I do think, though, there's one pillar at a time has been falling politically, not necessarily with the U.S. There are some pro Bitcoin candidates, but El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, still doing his thing, and now Javier Milei, I'm not sure how to say
Belay,
his name,
yeah, I think
but
it's Belay.
Argentina,
Argentina.
and you're talking serious countries now, Ukraine, Argentina, where these currency collapses have occurred. And I don't know if you've ever traveled abroad, but I've been to Brazil multiple times, and just about 2 years apart the two times I went. And the first time I went, it was about $2.70 to the dollar, and it was awesome. I got to do whatever I wanted. I felt like my money went very far. The next time I went, it was $4.50 to the dollar, real or whatever the exchange rate was. And I was like, these were like multiple things that kept themes that kept coming up throughout my life that made me think more about currency, because we don't think about currency that much in this country because we have the dollar and we think we're the best at everything.
I do definitely feel that most people in America are very privileged in the sense we're able to get a bank account, we have a very strong dollar. The idea of the U.S. dollar experiencing hyperinflation or possibly being devalued, it's not really a thought that most people entertain, but it's something that definitely keeps me up as I've sort of gone on my Bitcoin journey and sort of understood, well, how does money really work? But yeah. Um, how do you envision the impact of Bitcoin on society, economics, finance, and what continues to motivate you to be part of this significant shift?
The further that I go into it, I think the biggest difference is going to be that I don't know. Have you read the Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean's book?
I have not read that one now.
Okay. I thought that the most that was it's basically puts the white paper in a little bit more digestible terms. The white paper gets a little bit overly technical for me, but I thought I found it a little bit more digestible to kind of solidify um, Bitcoin and what is money, and going through all the different variations of why it was important. But I think the biggest thing that Bitcoin specifically will impact will be it is Bitcoin is for peace. It will make war less profitable. The Lockheed Martins, the Raytheons, etc., they do profit from mobilizing, the army, or utilizing and producing all the different types of defense things in this country. Whereas Bitcoin, uh, on a Bitcoin standard in that kind of a world, you would kind of have to account for that ahead of time. You cannot pay for war later with inflation, or print the money that you need in order to fund any sort of weapons. That's what happened in multiple wars throughout, whether it be Napoleon, both world wars, and any sort of inflation or devaluation that was how they paid for those. Whereas previously, I believe it was in like any times like way long ago, medieval times, you would have to tax and accrue the funds should war be necessary, whenever it is or isn't. You have to pay for that ahead of time. And with Bitcoin having a hard cap, you would have to have the funds in order to go there. You'd have to either tax the citizens which would not be friendly to voters. You would have to do it ahead of time. You cannot do it after the fact. It can't be a consequence, the payment of it. And that would basically make war not only, it would make it not viable as an option. So peace would be peace and diplomacy between nations would be much more viable strategy for any politician in office at that time. So I think that would be the biggest change to the world that I could see, or at least the most important one, especially with some of the various conflicts that are going on. I'm not trying to take any political stances here or there. I
No,
stay
no,
just
yeah.
about as neutral as I can on everything. But yeah, I think that's the biggest opportunity is making any sort of conflicts unprofitable or undesirable from a fiscal standpoint. They wouldn't make sense.
If there's one thing in this world you could fix, what would it be and why?
How to educate people on Bitcoin? No. Honestly, one thing that I would like to fix, I would very much like to uh, hope that some of the advances in genomic testing and things, I hope that they are helping to eradicate different diseases. That's the big ethos of anyone in the medical field, not just treating the diseases, but hopefully finding various cures, whether they be improvements, eradicating cancers, ALS. Specifically, my father has ALS, and so there are a lot of horrific diseases that I wish that they could be eradicated, or more funding towards, or finding true solutions for. Those are the real issues that think we need to be focusing on to make society better. That's what I would say if I could change one thing.
Are there any specific projects, innovations, or companies that excite you at this current moment?
Um, Companies, going to stocks. I definitely like anything that is definitely like anything that is crypto based. I'm considering some various options. Plays considering with mining stocks. I think that uh, people who are going to be leaning in towards blockchain innovation and gene editing. I find like CRISPR therapeutics, although those have all gotten hammered since they were all the rage in 2021. I find the technology quite fascinating. Um, there are a lot of ethical and moral issues that are associated with them that people bring up, and I I don't want to go there with this, but I definitely find like CRISPR therapeutics to be quite interesting. I know that you've talked a lot on the GLP-1s on some of your other podcasts. Uh, I was initially personally just a little bit resistant towards admitting it, but they are very good at weight loss management, and I personally just believe in working out and trying to stay healthy for a longer, better lifestyle. But the evidence is irrefutable. These aren't medications like Ally or anything else that you could buy over the counter. They're not garbage. They are going to produce significant weight loss. I've had close friends, etc., that have lost uh, actually significant amounts of weight in the realms of like 30 to 40 pounds. Because many of the other treatments that had come in weight management previously, they were always you could lose 1 to 2% of your body weight. And I was like, well, if you're 200 pounds, that's like 4 pounds. That's not going to make that much of a difference. Or if you're 300 pounds, that's 6 pounds. The difference between 300 and 294 is not that significant. Now, when you're talking 30, 40, 50 pounds, now I was like, okay, that's a very different endpoint. And I've kind of tapped into like, okay, hey, this is definitely something that could jumpstart someone into a healthier lifestyle and make a big difference. I don't necessarily think it's going to be should be the alone therapy. I do think it should always be combined with lifestyle modifications. But I'm now of the camp that they are a massive shift in weight management and a profitable niche for specialty pharmacies because most companies won't cover them. So a pharmacy, a specialty pharmacy can. I'd spoken with recently a specialty pharmacist who had said, "Oh yeah, the whole moniker amongst this right now, if you run your own smaller operation in this niche, isn't going to be the treatments that we fight with the insurance for payment. We joke that Wegovy keeps the lights on because patients come in, they get the referral, they pay cash for them because the insurance won't pay for what's considered cosmetic, which is unfortunate that they still consider it that, but." Yeah, it's helping them be profitable because they don't have to deal with PBMs, they don't have to deal with any clawbacks, anything like that.
Pretty interesting. You talked about the GLP-1s there. In terms of coverage, it's actually interesting. Our state Medicaid here in California will cover GLP-1s for weight loss. I don't know of any other health plan or payer that would do that.
Wow,
Yeah. You can actually look up the
wow,
formulary and I'll link it
that's
to you offline. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of my thought. I was like, Medicaid, GLP-1s, weight loss. That's kind of interesting.
oh, wow. That is awesome. If Medicaid does that, I did not think they would be that forward on it, but hey, that's amazing, for
Yeah.
sure.
The In our most recent podcast about the GLP-1s, there's actually going to be a study conducted to determine how much skeletal and cardiac muscle loss could there potentially be on GLP-1s. I think that was a concern that was raised. Obviously, there isn't really much data that's out there, but that is something I've thought about since our last podcast. So, like, something to consider when you do start these GLP-1s for weight loss. So, um, is there a question or topic that you believe that hasn't been addressed yet that you probably would like to talk about or elaborate on?
No, I think we covered a lot. We definitely
Good.
rounded the bases for sure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I definitely think we hit on just about everything from hospice care to Bitcoin to GLPs and everything in between. Is there anything else you'd like to ask me, or?
I guess, people will listen to this, and where can people go to find out more about you and your
Yeah.
work?
You can contact me, DM. I'm Instagram at vets3AOVETTZ, and you could always reach out to me. Always available. Or Adam Olivetti. Just type me in. I'm always willing to talk to anybody. You can find me online in any of the socials, anything like that. But yeah, or All in Investing podcast. It's been a while since we've posted. We've been wanting to possibly start up a challenge with regard to that, maybe some options or something like that. But maybe we'll have to get
Cool.
back into the game.
Nice. Adam, thank you so much for being on today's podcast. I appreciate your time, and we hope to have you back again.
Absolutely. Have a great day, James.
You too.